The Graphic Histories Podcast.
I got bit by a radioactive bug. I tried an experimental drug. Went up for a stroll on a gamma testing range. I found an enchanted hurricane. I made a serum that made me small. I modified the serum so it would make me tall. Radioactive isotope in my eyes. Dying alien helped me accessorize. I gained the proportion and strength of a spider. Now I'm invincible and I can fly. I lost my sight, my other senses were heightened. I'm gonna put on my pajamas and go fight crime.
Hey there, and welcome to the Graphic Histories Podcast. My name is André and I will be your podcast host. Big thanks to Uka the Mock for our theme song, Superpowers. And big thanks to you, gentle listener, for once again tuning in to the show. Today is our special, fun-filled Christmas edition, as this episode is airing on December 25th, which I don't think I need to tell you is in fact Christmas Day. I hope Santa was good to you. I hope you're with family and friends and loved ones. I hope that everything you wanted this holiday season to be, it has been that and more, because you deserve it. I mean, I like to think that people listen to my show are good people that deserve good things happening to them, and I'd like to believe that life works that way. So I hope all the good things are happening to you and yours, and you're having a great day. I've talked about the holidays before. I've always said I'm a big fan of Christmas. I still am. It's a lovely time of year. I find people tend to be a little nicer. I know you can get wrapped up in the commercialization of Christmas, which is all part of it. But there is, at its heart, I think, a real kindness and a joy there, which I'd like to foster. It doesn't need to be all about gifts. It is nice to give people gifts. I do get a lot of joy of seeing people enjoy the things I give them. And I know that's not necessarily the point of friendship, but, it's nice when you give someone something that makes them smile or makes them happy, or maybe it's something they didn't think to get themselves or maybe couldn't get themselves. And if you can provide that joy to them, it's a nice way to make the people in your life that are special to you feel special, which is lovely and nice. So that being said, I hope that you are having a great holiday, and I hope everything is going well in your part of the world. Today's episode is featuring our guest, Christopher Sequiera, who I had to ask him during the episode how to pronounce his name correctly. I'm glad he gave me that information, because I was very afraid that I wouldn't be able to do that. Because, it's not often during a conversation you say the last name of your guest. Usually you're trying to keep it casual and go by the first name basis, but you don't usually call them Mr. whatever their last name is. So I'm glad I was able to ask Chris. He was a great conversation. We had a lot of talk. Obviously, he's big into the horror world, as am I, so we had a lot in common on that. And we get to talk about sort of the Australian side of things when it comes to Comic-Cons and art, and the kind of art that we have over here that makes it over there. Very interesting and a very great talk, and one that I think you will enjoy. Most recently, his Star Trek comic, Halloween, which is Holodeck Halloween, has just come out, in which he wrote it, and the artist by Joe Eisma, who was our previous guest on the show. So that's out there. You should go pick that up, as well as a really cool collection of I believe it's called Caped Fear is what it is, which is a collection of stories containing one of his stories and one's by Neil Gaiman and other people as well, which is coming out as well, which looks really cool and should be a great read. But so that's going to be a good one as well. I have to give a shout out to my podcast partner over on X-Rated, the X-Men Anime Review Show, Davin Skellhorn, for stepping into the role as my producer in a way. We haven't given him all of responsibilities yet, but he's getting there. I'm kidding, Davin, if you're listening, which I'm sure you are. You've been an insurmountable help lately with the show, helping me acquire guests. And thanks to him, I have a bevy of really cool guests coming down the pipeline. I might even mention who the next one will be at the end of the show. So why wait any longer? I'll give you the Christmas gift of not listening to me ramble on any longer than you need to, and to get right to the episode. So here's my chat with Christopher Sequiera.
Hey, Andre.
Hey, Chris, how are you?
Good. I got my days and times completely confused because somebody else asked me to do something.
Oh, that's okay. If this isn't a good time, we can reschedule. No worries.
No, this is a good time. This is actually a perfect time.
Oh, beautiful. Excellent. Well, I think you get an award for being probably the person the farthest away from me in doing one of these episodes. So, what part of Australia are you in?
I'm in Sydney
Oh,
on
really?
the east coast.
Beautiful. My sister-in-law lives, I think, on the Gold Coast.
Oh, which is where one of my bosses IPI Comics, my boss who owns IFW Big Publishing, Jerry Huntman, he lives up on the Gold Coast. So that's about 10 hours drive or an hour on the plane away.
Yeah. Yeah. And my wife has gone down. My wife's from here. I'm in Nova Scotia, Canada there. But she went down with her mother years ago to go visit her, and I'd like to go down sometime because I'd love to see Australia. It's a dream of mine.
It's a beautiful place. Yep. And look, USA money and Canada money is pretty good exchange rate wise here, mate. You'll do well. You'll be able to spend up big.
Excellent. I had a friend that was from Australia as well, so he gave me he's back there now. He lived here for quite a while. I met him when he was living here, but he let me in, and I met quite a few of his relatives that came up when he got married because he had a wedding here. So yeah, so I had a good mix of culture. I learned about drop bears and all that fun stuff.
Yes.
And there's a gentleman I know who actually just got his Canadian citizenship that's from Australia that is in a theater group I was in. So, yeah, it sounds like a lovely place, and everything I hear about it and see about it just makes me want to go more. So, someday.
Excellent.
Awesome. So, did you grow up in Sydney? Is that where you're from originally?
Yeah, I'm born and raised here.
And was writing, was comics something that you were always interested in, or just writing in general?
Pretty much comics from as soon as I could get my hands on them, but I always like writing.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it was writing short stories or comic book scripts, love both.
What were the comics you were reading?
Look, we were getting all the Marvels and DCs. Although when I was a kid, there was a large number of Marvel, particularly DC comics at first that were embargoed and weren't sold here because there was a company that had a licensing arrangement with DC. And so what they would do was DC would send them the black and white copies of the pages, and they would print 3 or 5 issues of a DC comic together in a black and white comic that would be sold on Australian newsstands only. So all the DC material for a long time, the colour stuff wasn't, except with the exception of a small number of titles, wasn't available here, and you could get it. You got it in comic book shops and other places, but you didn't get it at newsstands. And then eventually they sort of relaxed that, and you could get both versions. And then the people doing the black and white reprints eventually gave that up about 20 years ago or something.
Oh, really? Well, that's interesting. I always find it because when I went to Scotland and Ireland, I noticed they had one of the comic book shops was selling like some imprints of Marvel comics that were only sold there, like UK editions and stuff. And they had characters. Yeah, there are characters I'd never heard. Like I know Death's Head came from there, but there are other characters that I'd never heard of that had they had 4 separate series.
That's where Captain Britain first appeared for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, before they folded them into the regular series. So it's always kind of interesting about how much they incorporate that sort of stuff, like that just you're unaware of until you get a chance to see it. Now with the internet, you can kind of see everything or find everything. But yeah, even like the Hulk UK comics, they have different storylines and different stuff going on. It's very, very interesting.
Well, there was no original Australian material created for either the Marvel or DC reprints. So unfortunately, it was just straight reprints and not a page of other stuff. It was a very good, cheap way to pick up a lot of storylines when you were a kid.
Which ones were you which ones did you gravitate towards the most?
I was reading everything. every Marvel and DC comic I could get my hands on, I was reading them all, with maybe a couple of exceptions. I wasn't a big sword and sorcery fan when I was a kid, so I wasn't reading Conan. But just about everything else, I was.
Now, would comic reading in your youth be something that was culturally cooler than it would have been in our neck of the woods here? No.
No. Definitely not.
No. Excellent. Well, then we're well aligned, because it certainly wasn't super cool when I was young either. That's funny. So like after reading, what point did writing become a thing for you? Was that like great at a young age, or like high school?
Look, I always liked writing. I was the typical kid in the English class at school that when the teacher said, I want you to write a composition, I'd love it. I'd be really excited because it's like, hey, great, I'll get to write a story. And so those natural inclinations sort of stayed with me. And I sort of started doing stuff around an almost fanzine level, but a bit more developed than that. Project based in Sydney with a couple of other guys. We started editing our own magazine of short horror fiction and articles, and we ended up doing, not quite annually, 3 quite fat book-sized editions of this thing, which I named Terra Australis, the Australian Horror and Fantasy magazine. There'd been an Australian Horror and Fantasy magazine by a guy called Barry Radburn, who we knew, and he wound it up. And then me, the main guy, Lee Blackmore, another guy, Bryce Stevens, we decided to keep this thing going. And it was a paid market. We paid, and we took open submissions, and we got thousands.
Really?
And yeah. But we used to always try and write a little something each issue ourselves, whether it be an article, a short story, or whatever the case might be. So we were doing that, and we were reading and reviewing and editing stories for 3 book-sized editions, and we're doing interviews with big-name horror writers like Clive Barker and
oh wow, so at that point, how would you have access to him? How would you have found Clive to interview for the show?
I can't remember how Lee did it, but I think he got it from his publisher at the time.
Wow.
And I think he did that one by phone too. And that was, so we were really sort of reaching out to the horror prose market and reveling in that. But we would have comic book reviews or a couple, things like that in the magazine, and we ran 1 or 2 short comic strips. I think I wrote one in the 3rd issue, so that was an itch where we were able to scratch. But I talk about that one because that's what really made me a writer and editor, because reading so many stories, and we had a really rigorous critiquing method. We wrote back to everyone who sent us a story, whether it was garbage or not. Mm-hmm. We gave them a couple of notes, right? Even the ones we rejected. Mm-hmm. And that's how I really I think I improved my writing skills manyfold just from that exercise, because just by reading and thinking why something doesn't work, and we used to have a round table thing where we would discuss. Once a week, we get together at one other of our places over coffee, and we go, okay, what did people think of this week's batch of stories? And we discuss. We had a rule: 2 votes, it's in, or 3 votes, it's in. But it has to be 2 or 3 votes. No matter how much someone likes it, if it's only 1 vote, it doesn't go in. So we would get in there, and sometimes we would fight for a story we really thought was good. So, and try and talk one of the other guys around. So it really made us think about story, execution of story, and I am confident that had a big part to do with the evolution of my storytelling skills.
Wow. And was horror like something that you locked onto at a young age as well?
Yeah,
awesome.
I loved horror. I loved horror from an early age. Actually, I reckon I probably entered horror via a couple of things. Reading Bram Stoker's Dracula, and probably like even those Marvel ones that were floating around in secondhand bookstores when I was a kid, you could go in and pay $20 and buy a mountain of comics, and I'd get these Werewolf by Nights
Oh, yeah, nice.
and then Tomb of Dracula's and a whole bunch of those weird reprint ones like Beware and Chamber of Chills and all this crazy stuff, as well as some of the DC ones like Ghosts and stuff like that. Those anthology books. And they were all pretty cool, but particularly the Marvel stuff I stumbled on. And I remember then going on a bender trying to find those black and white Marvel horror magazines, Tales of the Zombie, Monsters Unleashed. I just absolutely adored those.
They're lovely.
Spent many years trying to assemble a sort of complete collection of most of them, which I think I've more or less done now. But I really liked them. I liked them because they were clearly Marvel-esque, but they could go that tiny little notch extra on the violence that Marvel couldn't do back then in those old 70s comics.
Right, yeah.
So, yeah. That boom was pretty much over by the time I was getting into it. So, but I mean, I love my Marvel superheroes as well and my DC superheroes.
Oh, that's awesome. I've always been kind of fascinated with Australian horror because I'm a big movie guy as well. And I have yet to see an Australian horror movie that I haven't loved. Like, I haven't seen them all, but like Razorback, Next of Kin, Road Games, Dead Calm, like Mungo. Like, there's just tons of very interesting, cool, unique. I mean, the Wolf Creek series is its own sort of thing too, but Talk to Me most recently being a fantastic, that was a fantastic one. So I've never seen Wake and Fright, but that's one that it comes up a lot, and the Babadook, all those sort of ones. But
my assistant knew the bloke who wrote Wake and Fright.
Oh, really? That one is kind of amongst cinema fans. That one is spoken very highly. Yeah. But yeah, I've always, because every time I've watched in like some of the New Zealand ones too, but that's a whole other world. But like just anything I've seen from that neck of the woods, like horror wise, I've loved. So it seems like there's a unique connection between horror and well, I mean, obviously, like because George Miller stuff, like Mad Max was quite a horror movie, but it was skirted the line with that sort of drama, sort of exploitation stuff, and like Dead End Drive-In, a bunch of other interesting ones like that. So. No, that's cool.
I think part of the ethos is we don't have the kind of money for big budget movies, so that forces people to be creative, both from a story point of view and a commercial point of view. If you're going to make an indie film, you need something that can sort of sell internationally, and horror travels well, usually across geographical and language barriers, so I can see why people have turned to it again and again.
Yeah, it's also like a lot of people that become big directors usually start by doing horror movies because it's like a cheaper way to get into the film industry usually, and it's kind of got a built-in audience. Like horror fans kind of go to everything usually. There's so yeah, I always find that kind of an interesting way. Like I mean, for instance, the Babadook being like one of the most famous ones of recent years, probably. Jennifer Kent did an episode of Del Toro's Netflix show, The Cabinet of Curiosities, which is also very much about grief. And I think the Babadook, to me, is like anybody going through any kind of grief, like if you lose a loved one, should watch that movie. It's like the best movie I've ever seen about grief in my life. It's fantastic. So yeah, it's unique, and it's just like a different voice, I guess. I suppose you get kind of used to hearing the voices of North American filmmakers, especially for us, because that's all you see all the time. But when you can branch out and see what they're doing in other countries, man, there's some really unique, especially Mexico. There's some really unique, cool stuff coming out of places like that you have to really. And there's an Iranian vampire movie I mean to watch a while ago called.
Wow, cool.
What was it called? It was very popular. A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, I think it's called. It's got a long title, but yeah, it's supposed to be a very unique one too. Yeah, so they're out there, but I've noticed a lot of your work kind of centers around vampires, and perhaps that's because of the Dracula. What age did you read Dracula at?
It was. I think I was about 17 or something. So I was a little kid.
It's a heady read for a 17-year-old.
It was like a bolt of lightning. It was like an absolute bolt of lightning. I read Marvel Dracula interpretations and bits and pieces here and there, and seen plenty of Christopher Lee movies. But when I read the actual novel, Actually, it might have even been earlier than when I was. It was like a bolt of lightning because, of course, it's so much more and so different, really, to most of the Dracula films and comics and stuff. And it's so layered, and it's so much also about societal mores of the time, which, of course, well out of date a century later. But it's fascinating. It's fascinating because there is that barely repressed sexuality in the book, and that's fascinating. And so you keep flipping back and forth between these scenes of almost, carnal delight, and yet the Victorians couldn't tolerate anything of that, so it's all suppressed. And then this genteel behaviour between the various characters and particularly the interactions between the men and the women and stuff to do with the courting and marriage rituals of the day. And it's just it creates a fascinating dynamic, and then you inject it with a lot of the tenets of the high British Gothic just as the Victorian era is coming to an end, and no wonder it's so memorable. It's an absolutely perfect stew. I don't think he knew what he was doing. I don't think he realised what he was tapping into.
No, likely not.
It's so good that he did.
Yeah. Well, I always thought, I think it's something that people have picked up on later, but I like what you said about how it represents, or there are elements of what's going on in the themes that still carry on to today. I don't think something that isn't necessarily paid attention to when it comes to the Dracula myth, or the story rather, and vampire myth in general, is generally they're depicted as aristocrats, like rich people that lord, and the rich feeding on the poor is generally a trend that happens in most vampire fiction. So I feel like that's something that is ripe for what's going on today and the issues that people are having with the wage gaps and all that sort of stuff. But do you have a favorite? So is Christopher Lee your Dracula, if you had to pick one from the film depiction?
In terms of performance, it's got to be Mr. Lee, and I'm a diehard Peter Cushing fan. So basically,
excellent.
Anything involving the two of those is just absolute bliss. But yeah, the Christopher Lee Dracula just captures a little bit. I mean, the famous thing about the Christopher Lee Dracula is a story that Lee told himself. So they filmed the thing, and it's a beautiful production, and
I love it.
And they did a number of firsts, the Technicolor and all the rest of it. And Lee had particularly made sure not to look at the Lugosi one because he didn't want to be influenced by that, and he plays it without an accent. But Lee tells a story that he and Cushing, and I think Michael Carreras, the owner of Hammer, they go off to New York for the New York initial screening of Horror of Dracula, as it was named over there.
Yeah, that's what it was called. I have a Blu-ray of it. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called in my Blu-ray as well.
Yeah.
So,
what was it called? Was it called Dracula in the UK and Horror of Dracula in the US, or I've got it back to front?
Anyway, I think my release was by Warner Archives, so I think that's an American company, so that would make sense. Yeah.
Anyway, so Cushing and Lee are in the cinema, and the film starts, and Lee reported that there's the usual sort of little bit of talking and faint bit of laughing as people sort of bounding around. Various sinister shenanigans are going on, and then Christopher Lee told the story of how he came on the screen as Dracula and greets Michael Gough, I think it is, who's playing Jonathan Harker, Alfred from a couple of the Batman movies. Anyway.
Yeah. All right. Was that the same guy ago or whatever? Yeah. I didn't realize that. Wow. Oh, wow. Okay.
Indeed.
He was so much younger. It was hard to believe. That's amazing. Right. Yeah.
That's wow. Right. He was supporting cast to two Batmans.
Yeah.
So the one with fangs. Yeah. So there's that scene where Dracula comes down and says, nice to meet you, Mr. Harker, or whatever. And Lee reported the whole audience shut up. They all shut up, and it was almost an intake of breath because he wasn't doing an unusual, funky, weird accent.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a straight British voice. And the presentation, he wasn't doing weird close up. They weren't doing weird close up on his eyes or anything. He just comes in and comes walking in there, cape wrapped around his shoulders, but he's sounding and acting just like a normal guy. And they're all sort of going, oh, this is interesting. There are not all these studied and bizarre expressions and convolutions of the weird hand gestures that she did, which I love. But it's an important thing to remember. Sometimes, you grounding these things in some sort of reality, even if you want to say there's a supernatural layer to some of these characters and their capabilities, it's important to forget if you make them look human, you're really getting the audience in.
That was the beauty of his version too, was that like he seemed like an aristocrat. He seemed like I really actually like the Mark Gatiss one, that series they did Netflix a few years ago. I can't remember the English actor that played him in that, but the one with Christopher Lee's one,
Claish Bang.
Claish Bang, that's his name, right?
Now my good buddy Dave Elsey, he did the special effects on that.
Oh wow! No, I really dug that show.
He won the Oscar for Wolfman with Benicio del Toro, or co-won it with his pal Rick Baker.
Oh wow! Okay, that's royalty right there. Amazing.
Dave co-created with me Dark Detective Sherlock Holmes, the comic book series that we published here, and it was picked up in the States. Four issues of it was picked up as a trade by Caliber Press a few years ago, but the rights have come back to me, so I'll probably do something different with them.
Are you going to continue on with that series?
We are in the States. Caliber only printed one trade and didn't print it as singles. Mm-hmm. There's actually 10 issues, so and one that was never finished, and which is basically Sherlock Holmes and the Knights of Frankenstein. And so in Australian newsstands, we got so far with it, but we never finished it off. So that's one I would like to do. But Dave was a co-creator on that.
Oh wow, that's amazing! So cool. Okay, well we're gonna get to that. I was just gonna say I really love the because his version, like Lee's version, was so aristocratic. But then, like when you see him turn, like when he's the eyes with the red bloodshot and the teeth and the blood coming out of his face, like he it's like a switch. And he becomes like an animal, and it was such a unique, like, because everything but Lugosi was so, he's such a unique and weird character because of his his accent and his movements. But it just all seemed very calculated, I guess. So I like the idea that whatever this thing is, that what a vampire is, there's like a weird line that between savagery and civility that gets this, when blood's on the out is when that switch gets flipped, and they did such a good job of depicting that. I would think that's a neat way, because it's almost like other things have done vampirism as a stand-in for drug addiction or something. The Abel Ferrara did a movie like that, and I think Larry Fessenden did a movie like that. But the idea of like that, being this drive, this need is very interesting, and something that, when depicted well, is very cool.
I think that's one of the nice things about the vampire as a narrative fictional device, is you can do so many cool different things. Mm-hmm. And part of the fun sometimes is figuring out what hasn't been done. I mean, George Romero did one called Martin.
Right, yes, yeah.
Who thinks he's a vampire.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just really cool.
Yeah. There's another one like that it was kind of like a more modern take on that. I want to say it was called Bite, but maybe not, a few years ago. And it was a very similar idea. It was a little kid that became convinced he was a vampire. Very unique. So when you were getting into writing, and like, how were your parents feeling about this? Were they happy you were in the creative field, or do they want you to go in a different route? Or
look, my parents basically, look, I'm really lucky. I had parents that basically said, as long as you're working, as long as you're happy, we don't care what you do. I mean, I can remember early in life, one year, I dropped out of university. I was working in a supermarket for a year. They didn't care because I had a job. They didn't care. They sort of said, you'll smart enough you could be a lawyer or a doctor or anything, and I'd go, I'm working it out. You know, they didn't get.
Oh, that's awesome. It's rare that you find in the creatives people's parents that are that cool. That usually they're like, you want you to, you know, get a more stable job or something that's more concrete.
Nah, my parents are like that. I'm the eldest of 9. They were like that.
Oh my God.
No, they were like that with all of us. They didn't care what we did, as long as we're happy, as long as we had a job, had income, had roofs over our head.
What did they do? What did your folks do?
They were, you know, typical. They were a perfect example of middle class. He was a school teacher, and she was a nurse.
Oh wow! And 9 kids. That's a lot of children.
It is a lot of children.
One is terrifying to me. So I don't know how you'd handle doing 9. My God. What was that household like? Was it just chaos constantly?
It was noisy.
Were you like
11 people with very strong opinions?
Were you the only creative type, or did some of your brothers and sisters follow?
No. My brothers are musicians. One brother's a filmmaker.
Oh wow!
One of my sisters used to sing. So one of my sisters currently has got a producing career going on the side, a film producing career going.
Oh wow!
So yeah, we look, you know, we liked drawing, and then you like writing, and then you like playing music. So it all sort of develops from there.
Yeah, that's lovely. Cool.
And it was always encouraged. My parents weren't particularly artistic themselves, but they just encouraged anything their kids did. Anything the kids did, it was just fantastic as far as I was concerned, which probably helped.
That's lovely. So so when you were doing the horror book, and that led to you doing your own stuff with the Sherlock Holmes book, was that the first one, or were there other books before that?
Oh, there was lots of stuff. The first thing I did after doing this 3 issues of this book size edition of Terra Australis, in fact, before we got to the end, me and the 2 other guys of doing Terra Australis, before we got to the end of that, I'd started publishing my first comics. And actually, when I say publishing, I was writing it and sort of masterminding it, but I was also organising it to be printed and distributed through newsstands nationally. So I was actually publishing. And it was a vampire thing. It was called Pulse of Darkness. So we did 4 issues of that and one of something else. I put it out over about a year or something. And that was lots of fun. And then I took a break from that and did more short story writing. And then I think I had another go at publishing, and I did about 8 comic books in 1 year, again nationally distributed. And then, but about the same time I did that was about the same time I broke in and did a couple of things for DC.
So how did that occur? Like how did you get? Because I mean, obviously it's quite a distance between your location in DC, and I'd hope that they would keep feelers out for writers and creators all across the world, but you feel like that's a pretty big division. So how did you get to that?
Look, that was literally should not have been possible. I did not go to a convention. I did not meet an editor coming out here for a small convention. I literally was sending stuff in the mail to DC.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I'd follow it up with an email or a phone call, and one guy, an editor who was a fairly senior editor back then, named Dan Raspler, who was in charge of all the Justice League stuff. Mm-hmm. He said, I got this story idea of yours. And he said, I wouldn't use it for the Justice League, but we're doing this new book called Justice League Adventures based on a cartoon that hasn't yet come out. And I'd really like you to turn this idea into an issue of that. Would you like to try? I said, yep. Whatever. Yep. And so I did a couple of those for him and his assistant editor, Steve Wacker, who's now a very well-known senior figure in the comics space. He worked for Marvel TV. He's worked for senior editor of Marvel. Worked at DC on 52. So, but that was literally, that should not have happened. I should not have had, nobody breaks in through the mail. Writers do not break. They didn't break in then. They don't break in now. It's not supposed to happen, and yet it happened.
Wow. That's a rarity. That's true. I've never heard of anyone I know that has got any connection or people I've had in the show. Usually it's through some friend of a friend or some publishing that some editor sees or something, it's rare. It's
no track record. This guy, I didn't know him. I didn't know anyone at DC. Had I even been to the States at all? I had been to the States once before that. That's about it,
Wow.
So that shouldn't have happened, but it did. And it made me think, okay, well, while I might do some writing and other things here, I would keep throwing things at people overseas and see what happens. And that's sort of what I'm still doing today.
Wow. Well, that's super cool. That's amazing. So did that lead, once you got that under your belt, did that lead to like the other studio? Because you worked for Marvel doing Dazzler and a few other things, didn't you? And the X-Men.
That lead went completely cold. Dan left DC.
Yeah.
I couldn't get arrested at DC.
Really?
Didn't matter what I'd done. The guy I knew was gone. I tried some other people. It was like, I don't really know who you are, so maybe I'll look at it, maybe I won't. They didn't, which is what normally happens in all aspects of publishing. If you got a book at a publisher and your editor leaves, unless you've signed a contract, it'll never happen, because the new people come in and they won't look at the old people.
Yeah.
And that's fine. That's just the way of the world. That's fine. You work that out and then you move on. Now, I sort of, with my Marvel stuff, which was, I think it was that Dazzler thing. No, I did an Iron Man story from Astonishing Tales before that editor left Marvel. But that was I broke in fresh with him, right?
Yeah.
And then some years later, I did the Dazzler story at Marvel. I freshly broke in with her, with the editor on that one. She didn't know me from the other one. So,
And how did that come about?
I just politely harassed the hell out of these people.
Oh, you're tenacious. That's the key to getting somewhere, especially in the writing industry.
Well, and look, the thing is, I would look at what somebody was publishing, as in like editing, and I would go, are they editing anybody's work or putting out the kind of stories that suggest to me the kind of stuff I like to do they might be able to use? Because it's like the old saying, you don't go to Mills and Byrne and offer them a Western, right?
Yeah.
They publish romance. You don't go to editor A who might be publishing, very straight up and down superhero stuff and offer them a horror angle. If you see that, and they don't seem to have any horror sensibilities at all. You try and look for something that you can say to them, hey, I noticed you published this. I think you might like this. Would that be something you want to talk about? And they'll either reply or down. But when I got that that Astonishing Tales story for Marvel, the editor who gave me that job, John Barber, who's he's not with any particular company at the moment. I think he's freelance. He's a fantastic guy. I've met him over the years and chatted. We talk about a lot of stuff. And in some ways, he indirectly led to me doing that Star Trek gig at IDW last year. Mm-hmm. This year. Actually, it came out this year.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's my previous guest in the show is Joe Esma, who is your artist for that, right?
Yeah. Joe's fantastic.
Yeah, he's a super cool guy.
John had edited a book, and it might have been a Dominic Fortune book at Marvel. Mm-hmm. And the style and the sensibility, I thought, this cat would probably dig my take on a couple of obscure characters. And that opened up a conversation, and he looked at an 8-page unpublished short story that I'd done with a big collaborator of mine, Chewie Chan, and John just loved it. John just loved it, and on the strength of that, he said, "I got to try and find something for you." And this was unusual; it doesn't happen either. No. He said, "I got to find something for you two guys to do together."
Wow.
That's why Chewie drew the Iron Man story.
Wow.
Which is the late Tom Palmer. Chewie was actually in the States too, and followed up with it, popped his head into Marvel and had a meeting with him. But yeah, I mean, you know, editors will only be interested in stuff if it's the kind of stuff they're into. You're trying to sell them your 12-part science fiction, um, opus, and they don't like that kind of material, or they don't have the platform to publish it. You're wasting your time. So I tend to target people based on, okay, well, they've got a franchise, or they've published a book, and the kind of stuff that I can do would be like that. And I sort of think that's sort of good, because you're playing to your strength and you're presenting it, but you're also cutting to the chase for these very, very busy people.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They really only want to hear about something that might, tick off a list on their schedule. They really don't want to get yet another thing that they don't really need to buy.
That's actually a very unique way of looking. Not unique, I guess, but it's not something I hear very often when it comes to people getting involved in the industry. It's like you are actually finding the people that make the things you want to make. And then because you're right, like they probably get submissions left and right all the time for things that aren't necessarily in their wheelhouse. And they probably get thrown away without even getting read.
Exactly. I mean, they talk about this much more frequently in the publishing space. I work in the publishing space, so I'm aware of it as both an editor and a commissioning editor, and a writer myself. But as I was saying, you don't try and sell a romance novel to a Western company.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've written a novel and you want to try and sell it, besides, all right, there's one separate track there about trying to get an agent, but even then, you don't go to an agent that doesn't rep that material. And most agents are really good. You look on the internet now, you can find out whether they're even looking at submissions, and they'll tell you, I'm only reading this SF, and don't send me this, and this. And, so you think about the agents, you think about the editors, you think about the publishing company. You write the book you want to write. I'm working on it, of all things, a true crime book at the moment that doesn't have an agent or a publisher attached, although there's a query out by a friend of mine told me to query an agent on their personal recommendation, which I've done, and we'll see what happens there. But at the end of the day, really, for the thing to have any chance, I'll keep writing it. It needs to be written because it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
An agent who will take it and the publisher who will buy it will be somebody who knows what to do with it, so that it has any chance in hell of making its money back or becoming a bit of a success.
Mm-hmm.
And so you need people who are confident and experienced in that genre or in that channel. So if you think about that, you'll avoid a lot less rejection letters than I racked up over the years, I can tell you.
Well, I always say you gotta swing the bat a few times before you hit a home run, right? So
absolutely. But I've got to the point now where I actually enjoy it.
Yeah.
I actually enjoy that part of it, because you put yourself deep in that mind space before you target someone, and that's a really good exercise. And you can reflect that back and go, and then you'll get different responses. Some you get no response. Some you'll get a sentence or two. Oh, look, I had a look at this. It looks pretty good, but I can't use it. And you actually get a variety of experience, and it's good to develop comfort with rejection, but also pluck out the seeds from the ones that give you a tiny bit of feedback.
Mm-hmm.
There might be a nugget of gold in there that makes the next submission on that thing or a different thing even you'll do it even better. You'll express it better, or you'll slim it down better, or whatever.
Yeah, that's lovely. So I had a couple questions. First, what's the true crime book about? Or can you say at this point?
Jack the Ripper.
Oh, excellent. Very cool.
And it's look, I'll tell you the story. It's a very quick story. So I didn't write this. a mate of mine wrote this in 1997 and told me about it. And that's how we became friends, because I've had a lifelong interest in Victoriana, Sherlock Holmes, Jack the Ripper, read every book since about 1975, published on the Ripper theory. Yeah, completely steeped in that. And I met this guy purely because he mentioned he'd written a book on Jack the Ripper. I go, oh, yeah, blah, blah. And I start rattling off facts, and he starts rattling off facts. And we both worked in the same industry at the time. That was how we happened to be talking. And we just became friends. And for the next 25 years or whatever, we would keep talking about it, and we did a couple of other interesting things, investigations of other crimes, historical crimes together. But we would talk about the Ripper stuff, talk about his theory. We'd go and dig up other stuff, debate it, see where it fitted. And he wouldn't bloody publish his book. He had, and I'm telling you, Andre, he's got it. He's got what no one else has ever done. He's worked out who it was.
Really?
He found a unique piece of evidence. I mean unique, incontrovertible piece of evidence. And the chain of custody, etc. stuff, issues are all 100% locked in, so it doesn't suffer from a weakness there. He's got him. And he wouldn't publish. Right? And
why not?
He died last year.
Wow.
And he left it all to me. It all to me.
Wow.
And he'd said to me about 10 years ago, oh, look, I'm not going to publish, and I'm going to leave it all to you, and you can do with what you want with it, right? I didn't know why. He kept telling me different reasons why he wouldn't publish. And they were all, at one stage he told me he was worried that the family might sue of his suspect. And I said, you can't sue for saying something about a dead guy, right?
Well, especially from centuries ago.
Well, you can't do it if they died 5 minutes ago.
Yeah,
right?
Fair enough.
So, and so you tell me a reason why. And then, anyway, what happened was I found out that he actually, around about 1998, 99, he moved house. He moved from Sydney to an isolated part of the state, very isolated part of the state. And I found out he was actually living in fear that a former friend who was a violent criminal would find him and make his life a misery.
Really?
He lived in that fear. And he
Wow.
didn't tell me, but I ended up piecing it together and talked to one of his best friends and blah, blah, blah. Because I knew he'd moved. I knew he'd changed his name when he moved. I thought, what's all that about, you know? Anyway, it all came to. So I'm sitting on an undisclosed Jack the Ripper theory. I'm slowly working on writing it up properly, because his version of it is pretty bad, pretty rough. And adding in all the stuff that we talked about over the years between the two of us. Tested other bits of evidence.
Well, please let me know when that comes out. I'm interested to read that. It sounds amazing.
Well, look, if it gets an agent, if it gets probably the biggest sticking point is because I've written so. I've had Jack the Ripper fight the Phantom back in the 1880s. I've had Jack the Ripper running around the Enterprise. I wrote a short story called "Catch Me When You Can" from Hell, which was like a tribute to Robert Bloch's. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper. I've done a heap of Ripper fiction and commentary and stuff. So probably my biggest problem is going to be every publisher is going to think, oh, you're just pulling our leg. This isn't real. But there's something in this book that is no one's ever seen before, and it's dynamite. And it's basically forget that fake Jack the Ripper diary from years ago. There's something in this book that is, when it's just put on paper over about 2 or 3 pages, people are going to go, like I did back in 1997, when my pal showed me this. I went, oh my God. And so the heart of this book, which was this friend of mine's key original discovery, it took him 2 weeks to figure this out. He was looking through all the evidence of the crimes, thinking, I feel like there should be something here. I won't say any more. And he found it. And then he delved into it. And then after that, he didn't even have a name for the Ripper.
Really?
Right? but he felt that there was something missing from the crime scenes, and he thought, I got to go through and have a look, and he found it. Anyway,
Wow.
and then he researched the guy, and then that was just a killer.
Yeah.
Pardon the pun. Everything he found out about the guy was just absolutely shocking, and it was like, well, this matches the psychological profile, his availability in the city on those times. He even found out what eventually happened to him.
Wow.
Which is very fitting as well. So it's a fascinating book, but it's me rewriting and expanding on a theory that another guy did 25 years ago. Amazing. And and here I am sitting on the guy who was fascinated by the Ripper in pop culture and fiction just as much as historically.
Yeah.
And that'll probably be the biggest obstacle any agent or publisher taking me seriously. But that's okay. If I exhaust all that, I'll self-publish.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. Well, what is your, do you, I mean, as someone who also would be on the same line, what do you think the fascination is with the dark side of humanity when it comes to serial killers, and even like stuff that's explored through fiction in its own way? Like, you know, I'm sure that bleeds into that sort of thing as well. Do you what, like, everybody has their own sort of reasoning as to why they're fascinated with that sort of stuff. What do you have you ever thought enough to think about why it works for you?
I was actually saying to my wife only a couple of nights ago, we were talking about some family issue or something or other, and the way, you know, we respond, or I respond and she responds. If you encounter some obstacle or conflict with a person or persons in the family or in the workplace, down at the corner store or whatever, and I said, you know what, I'm positive that I have poisoned my brain by reading 100,000 superhero comic books over my lifetime. And essentially most of them are little morality plays, Andre.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure, you know, my DNA has been contaminated irreversibly now by the idea that, you know, you should speak truth to power. With great power comes great responsibility. And there's a truth, justice, and the Australian way. To paraphrase some popular aphorisms, I mean, basically that you shouldn't put up with crap, and bad is bad, and I'll call it out if it's bad, and wrong is wrong, and I'll call it out if it's wrong, even if it gets me into trouble.
Mm.
And my wife's a bit the same, and you know, we've compared notes on things like that, and because it's just what you do. So yeah, I think everybody forms their moral templates in different ways. Some from primary school or Sunday school or parents or mixture of all that type of stuff, or a particularly influential big brother or uncle or whatever. Okay, you grab all those things, but the message of our culture is that bad is bad, good is good, bad will eventually be punished, and good, if good speaks long and loudly enough, it'll win the day. Now, I don't believe that now, okay, but that's what I was, you know, raised with. That's what they push on you when you're a kid, and it makes sense that they do. So that means as you start to understand that life is conflict and resolution of conflicts, the bigger the conflict and the more dark the oppositional force, the higher and the drama and the more the sweat and the sense of anticipation about the results. And I guess true crime's really interesting because it's those stories, good true crime that sort of analyses, you know, the background of thing, and not just, we all like those stories about how they caught the killer, but you always like that interesting biographical detail where, you know, Ted Bundy was a this and a that and blah, 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 and Jeffrey Dahmer was, and because we all want to understand how did someone end up so effed up?
Yeah, yeah. You can curse on this, that's fine. But yeah.
But we want to understand why are they like that, and why am I like I am? Why are they, you know, completely unaffected by depravity and violence? Why do they get off on hurting people? All that kind of stuff we're totally curious.
Yeah.
We're totally curious. Were they born without empathy? Is it the case, as the saying goes, we create monsters by child abuse between the ages of 1 and 7? What is it? I think that's the fascination for the true crime field.
Yeah, I believe, I think I've had a similar conversation with someone before where I've posited that same sort of idea, is that it's almost like the whatever I do, like, or whatever the person at the center of this thinking this way is. It's like, whether you stole $5 from someone, or grabbed a candy bar, or was rude to someone at work, or cheated on your wife, or whatever weird thing someone would have done, in the day-to-day life, it's like, well, it's a way of making your crime seem small in comparison. You seem like, well, I'm not a monster, like it's a way to hold up a way higher benchmark for horror than whatever mundane thing you did to make yourself feel better about the minor crime you did, or the minor way you react or think.
Yes, and that's justification. What means and lengths people will go to justify their actions. It's a good one.
Yeah. Very Machiavellian. Yes, everything. I know. What was it? He said that, like, and there's no, any excuse can get you out of anything or whatever. Like, there's some line he had that is quoted a lot about how all you need is a proper excuse to justify any sort of terrible behavior. Well, that's very interesting. Cool. Well, I noticed, just doing a small amount of research on you for this, that your wedding made the national news, apparently, because of a unique way it was depicted.
It did indeed. We got married on November 13th, 1999, and it was the first Elvis Presley wedding in Australia.
Well, Elvis was your officiant?
We had a guy dressed up as Elvis, as our officiant, and luckily he actually played the guitar. That was an extra. That wasn't. We actually got him because he was the only one who would do it. I was ringing celebrants up, and they were just hanging up. There's the more kooky, outlandish weddings, even back in 1999, no one did that kind of thing. But in this country, mate, it's a little bit too. We're very conservative in some respects, certainly around that. Anyway, but we wanted to do it. We wanted to have a complete costume wedding, right?
Yeah.
So, and we sort of figured out we knew who the main people were going to be. There was going to be me, my wife, my brothers were going to be my three brothers were going to be groomsmen. My wife's best friend and her two sisters were bridesmaids, etc., etc. So we had all this going on, and we'd worked out roles, and we thought, well, mate, Elvis as a celebrant's perfect. That's the thing. And we actually we had the wedding done in our backyard at the time, and we built a stage in the backyard, and we decorated it like a Las Vegas chapel.
Oh, beautiful.
And the theme of the wedding was eternal love. And then we hooked in from that theme. I was Count Dracula and my wife was Countess Dracula. So thereby we got the eternal love thing going.
Of course. Yeah. That's fantastic.
Yeah, so it was just a crazy sort of fun thing. But we just thought, what the heck, let's have fun with this.
And how did the Batman villains play into that?
My brothers, the groomsmen, my brothers, Mark, Brendan and Jonathan, they went as Two-Face, the Penguin and the Riddler.
That sounds fantastic. Wow.
Yeah, we had a ball. Yeah.
That's amazing. Super cool. So I guess your most recent work is this, was it Halloween? Or Hollow, because it's Hollow Deck, Halloween. With IDW. So I was talking to Joe a bit about it on the last episode, because he was talking about the art, and I was very locked in when he mentioned the Universal monsters, because that's like huge for me. Yeah. And I was like, well, who's the Gill Man? And he said it was Worf, and I was like, oh man. And like, I was super like, because the Creature of the Black Lagoon was always one of my all-time favorites.
I love the creature. Yeah, good old Rico Browning. And I've forgotten the name of the woman who designed it.
Oh yes, yeah, the woman, the costume designer. Yeah. I thought you were thinking of Julie. What's her name?
Not the actor.
Yeah, I have the poster literally right here. It's hanging on the wall.
I feel like it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but anyway, so I wanted to do the ultimate sort of riff on the holodeck, right? Push it to that one little extreme further if we could get away with it. And I thought monsters running all around. And then I thought to try and make it interesting, not people attacking the Enterprise in the form of monsters. No, let's have the Enterprise guys having to be monsters. And then I thought, and then let's have them believe they are those monsters while they're in those personalities. So not just wearing the outfits to scare or trick an alien or something, which that'd be an okay story, right?
Yep.
I can make one of those up. But I thought, no, to go like for enough for a mini series, to have enough juice to be a mini series, we need to do a hell of a lot more than that. I thought, what if they actually have to think our monsters? And then I started to figure out, well, then why would that happen, and how would they get out of it? What would go wrong halfway through, and mix it all around like that. And I wanted to do universal monsters, but I thought, well, we can't do universal monsters, and it shouldn't be that simple. There's so many cool monsters. All the universal monsters come down from classic literature, so let's go that way. So we got, and we actually had a list. Me and editorial had a list. We were bouncing around with us and Paramount of the different monsters that people could be, and we had, because we had decided on Councillor Troy, Commander Worf, Captain Picard, and Commander Riker as being the ones that get affected, and Data would be dragged into it as well. So we figured them out, and we had a list. And as it turns out, you get Data ends up as Frankenstein, Riker's a werewolf, Deanna Troy's a mummy, Picard is Mr. Hyde, and Worf, since I couldn't use the creature from the Black Lagoon, but I could use one of H.P. Lovecraft's deep ones from the Shadows Over, which is the classic literary public domain amphibians, right? And so that was what we're going to use. But in the end, as we spun the wheel around and Worf ended up with the Gill Man, I said, well, I don't even have to make it that. Let's bend the rules a bit. And that's we create for the story, there's a local Klingon myth, like a Halloween myth about aquatic Klingons. It's in their culture.
Oh, yeah, that's sweet. That's a great way to do it.
I thought it shouldn't all be Earth-centric, because that's kind of, that's making, all right, you want it for part of the thing.
Yeah.
I thought, let's absolutely exploit and enjoy the fact that the Federation is a world full of different cultures. So, and Worf's the key one, alien one, will be on this away mission. So that worked out well. I mean, I could have done a Klingon vampire or a version of a Klingon vampire, but the Gill Man just seemed perfect. So,
the design is neat. I like the way he looks, and it is pretty cool.
Joe Eisman did a killer job on that series. It just blew me away. The art was just coming in and getting shown to me by the editor, and it was just like, another cool page, and you see this scene you've imagined, and it comes in, and it's just even 10 times better than what I imagined. So it was great.
No, that's beautiful. Oh, that's super cool, man. So, and obviously I noticed that you have a fascination with H.P. Lovecraft works as well, because you did obviously with the Terra Austrata and some of this stuff you worked on. Do you is Lovecraft someone, because I'm a fan of him as well, and obviously the more you know about his history, the more interesting he is, and also problematic he gets as time moves on.
There's two things about Lovecraft that just always stand out to me, besides the well-covered, documented stuff about his genius.
Do you watch the recent documentary that came out like a year or two? Maybe it's like 2 or 3 years ago. Like
Well,
it's
I usually try and catch most of the docos on HBO that are on.
yeah, Del Toro is very active in it. It's pretty interesting.
I think I saw that
Yeah.
one. Yeah. But look, the two things about Lovecraft that stand out to me are one is if you met him in real life today, you'd want to punch the fuck out of him.
Oh yeah.
Right? He's a fucking asshole, right?
Oh, yeah.
Racist asshole.
Yeah.
Okay? However, like all of us who have bad traits, it's a bit more complex than that. I mean, he spoke as if he was an anti-Semite and he was married to a Jewish woman.
Yes, that's the interesting dichotomy about it. That's where, and like, because they split up when he didn't want to move and she left or whatever. But it was very
tried valiantly. Poor old Sonia Green tried valiantly to make him achieve his own potential.
Yeah,
and the greatest what if of fantasy literature in the United States is what if H.P. Lovecraft had a fucking accepted the job offer and moved to Chicago to edit Weird Tales like he was asked to do.
Yeah.
If he'd done that, his life would have been completely different.
Yeah.
Okay. And American fantasy would have been completely different. And it's really sad. He would have probably preserved his marriage. It's really sad. And yeah, he was a man tortured by a lot of things, but so many of them were self-inflicted. I think Lynn Carter's biography on Lovecraft, if I'm not misremembering my biographies, he had a phrase in there, something about one feels like shaking a fist in the face of this man who was, thwarting himself or something to that effect. Because, he just, and he lived in absolute penury because he refused to take a regular job. Now, by all accounts, he described himself as sensitive and all the rest of it. But by all accounts, he was a fairly physically fit guy. He loved to go on these marathon-like walks around his area in the mountains and stuff like that. So he's a fit enough guy, but he just clearly, maybe it was a hang-up. I mean, I'm getting into the psycho-projection. Maybe it was, my family used to be wealthy and I shouldn't have to take a mundane job and I refuse to. Right? I've known people like that.
Yeah.
And they will suffer just for that. They'll do anything.
Yeah. Pride will kill you long before whatever kills you kill you. It certainly will. Yeah. But
anyway, but you got to give the guy credit, even though some stylistic things of his are a bit of a worry, as well as those personal things we were talking about before. The reality is that he invented an entire genre, a subgenre, if you like, and it's actually an important subgenre because he basically slammed supernatural fiction and completely materialistic science fiction and slammed them together to make no distinction.
Yeah.
And that's really important. That's really quite a freeing thing that he did to 20th century fiction.
Well, I mean, so many of the writers that we herald to, like Stephen King, he was hugely influenced by him. If it wasn't for him and Richard Matheson, I don't think we'd have the Stephen King we do today. But
absolutely, and look, one of my favorite and inarguably one of the greatest still living horror writers in the world is Ramsey Campbell, who I've luckily had the distinct pleasure of working with on. He did the introduction of Cthulhu Deep Down Under Volume 1.
Right.
One of the greatest writers alive, and certainly the greatest horror writer alive. And Ramsey's, quite transparent about the massive impact Lovecraft had on him.
Wow. I mean, there's the one thing that he brought. I mean, horror was always to me anyway, and this is, I'm sure there's probably other examples that may play out with this, but to me, there's always like this level of like horror was very personal. You were either getting killed by a dude, a Jack the Ripper type, or a Frankenstein, who's one of my personal favorites, or Dracula. It's very personal between you and the monster, the creature murdering you. But when Lovecraft introduced something almost sterile and strange, like it's a term that people refer to as cosmic horror. And I once heard it defined as, man has this inherent need to find meaning with anything. That maybe that's the fascination with horror, is trying to find some meaning as to why people do the horrible things we do. But like man just has this inherent desire, humans, to find purpose, to find meaning, and the universe doesn't care about that at all. So I once heard it described that way, and I was like, that perfectly. It's like this direct horror, because it's this yearning for some sense of meaning, and the universe saying, no, there is none. You're never going to get that. And it's just this dichotomy between the two that'll never be rectified. But the idea of these things, these beings, so far beyond our purview that even a glimpse of one, or even like just the feeling of their essence, can just make your mind break. Is one of the most, like, it's just, brings it on such a level beyond how small and minuscule we are in the grand scheme of things, which is scary in itself. But like playing that, which is an inherent human fear, into horror, and putting a face to it, or a bunch of faces, or multiple faces on one being, is when it was such a genius idea. He literally took the tiny insignificant feeling that humans have, and built a whole thing around that, and made it like a true horror.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, cosmic horror could perhaps sometimes be called existential horror.
Yeah, I've heard it called that as well, which,
And I guess there's even a through line, which is kind of ironic, because there's even a through line to American comic books, I say it's ironic because the old DC Comics editor, Julie Schwartz, was H.P. Lovecraft's agent.
What, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And Julie Schwartz was, and he died a few years ago. I think he was one of the last people alive who actually had known H.P. Lovecraft in his lifetime.
Wow.
But and the through line is from Cthulhu to Galactus. Because what is that? What's that classic Stan Lee and Jack Kirby bit? I mean, I'll credit Lee for the words used, but of course we know Kirby did everything else. Galactus is neither good nor evil. He is so far above us that blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
However, it was conveyed in that classic, 3 issues of Fantastic Four. I mean, isn't that what Cthulhu is?
Yeah. And that's what I mean. Like, our ideas of morality are so far beyond whatever it is, that what's like, there's no rectifying that. You can't reason with a force of nature. You can't, although in Marvel Comics they somehow managed to reason with Galactus a lot. But the idea of that, like, this thing that it's just like, it's like when you watch these giant monster movies like Pacific Rim or one of those sort of things, it's like whatever those monsters are doing is like, we are nothing to them. Like, they can shake us off, like, it's this concept that, and the only connection we have of it is like running into cults of people that worship these things. Me and Joe had a great conversation about the John Carpenter movie, In the Mouth of Madness, which is one of my favorites, and it's such an interesting job of doing a Lovecraft thing without it being Lovecraft. I think he wanted to get the rights to the Mountains of Madness, but couldn't, so he did his own sort of take on it, which is genius in my opinion. But that one is another great one that goes unnoticed and underappreciated a lot.
That's really good.
Oh man. Well, what's next? I guess what do you have coming out next? The book maybe, and what actual things are on the go?
Look, the next things, the very next things I've got coming up are I'm editor-in-chief of this small independent comic book company called IPI Comics.
Mm-hmm.
That's the letter I, the letter P, letter I, comics, for one word, ipicomics.com.
Mm-hmm.
And we got a whole bunch of stuff coming out. And I will be doing some writing for them, but there's a lot of other people's stuff that we're bringing to print. And it's a division of IFWG Publishing International, which is the company who's been putting out novels and short story collections that I've done quite a few of the last several years. And it's basically the owner of that company, Jerry Huntman. He asked me to set up a comics division, and I've spent nearly a couple of years doing that. And we've got it ready to roll. Our first comics will be going in the January Diamond catalogue, Lunar catalogues, and being in comic shops in March. And we're doing a superhero book. We're doing a urban horror book. We're doing a manga series called fantastically talented lady called Queenie Chan. We've got a manga series called The Dreaming, which Tokyo Pop had, but it hasn't been in print for about 10 or 12 years, and we bought it at Tokyo Pop, and she's revised it, and it's going to be volumes 1 to 3, but she's doing a whole new volume 4 for us as well. So we've got those coming and a few other bits and pieces, but some of the other titles in the works for 24, 25 and 26, there's a Hannibal the Conqueror sword and sorcery fantasy series called Vale of Tears. Amazing thing by an Aussie rock god named Steve Kilby writing it, with another lady called Nicole Madenick. She's co-writing it. We've got a really cool, this doesn't do it justice because I said this is really cool and really different. A vampires meets mafiosi series called They Called Me Midnight by Nancy Holder and Alan Phillipson, which was based on a story Alan Phillipson wrote in a book I edited called Dracula Unfeigned. It was called War with the Mafia. And it was just, all right, it's vampires and it's mafia. But it was just, the story was just so well written. It was so riveting. It just seemed fresh, even though neither of those concepts is brand new. And I've read a million vampire stories, and I just said to Jerry, let's ask him to do a comic book series. And John K. Snyder, who's done some fantastic art at DC and Marvel, he's doing the art. So
beautiful. There's a horror movie that's one of my favorites that not a lot of people talk about that has a similar idea. It's a John Landis movie called Innocent Blood. Have you ever seen it?
Oh no, I haven't seen it.
Oh, it's
I know that one, but I haven't seen it. Yeah.
It's very good. If you liked with
a female lead vampire.
Yeah, from it's the woman from Luc Besson's Nikita movie, La Femme Nikita. I can't remember her name.
I don't know why I haven't seen it, but I know of it. Yeah,
it's very good. It's Robert Loggia's like one of the main mafia guys, I think. Yeah. Oh. Yeah, he's like, it's basically she's like a vampire that just kills bad people and makes it look like gangland crime to get away with it. To feed, cool. And then one of them, Robert Loggia, survives and then starts turning his mafia people into other vampires, and she has a team with the human cop that tries to. It's very good, right? Oh yeah, no, I'm sure it is. It's just like that made me think of that right away. Yeah, actually,
the big one that's coming. Former 1970s Marvel hero that had 19 issues, The Human Fly.
That's what I was going to say. I actually, when you mentioned the company name, I was like, I heard that somewhere. And it's because I remember reading the article about the Human Fly coming back, who, as a Canadian, I'm familiar with him because he was a Montreal guy, the original dude. And then the comic series from Marvel had like a 20-issue run back in the day. So that's super cool. That's super cool.
So we've made a contract with the owners of the entire Human Fly property.
Mm-hmm.
Two guys called Human Fly International, lovely guys, and we're doing we plan, hopefully, if we get our ducks in a row. We had a meeting about this week. Issue 0 will be first week in July next year.
Perfect.
And I'm hoping to do Montreal Comic Con.
Oh wow.
The launch of it there in the 5th and 7th of July next year. And Tony and Alan from Human Fly International come along there as well. It'll be drawn by a dude called Jan Scherpenhausen, who's done a lot of comic book stuff with me over the years, including some of this super Australian, super humanity stuff that we're doing. And we'll probably have 2 covers, one by Chewie Chan, and we might have a surprise variant cover for this one, something really cool. So that's an issue 0. And what's going to happen is I'll be writing the first story arc. Jim Kruger.
Oh, wow.
He's going to do the second story arc. And a lady who's some cool stuff for TV and other places, Dana Brower. Mm-hmm. She's going to write the third arc. And we'll mix it up. And there's a top super surprise guest writer or 2 that we're circling around, who might do some special stuff for us as well.
Oh wow, this is all very exciting.
Look, I really dug that character because I remember being a little kid on TV and seeing him on the news, as well as the Marvel comics being around. So I've wanted to do this for a long time, and I've been talking to Tony and Alan for actually a few years about this. And then when my own comics company editorship dropped in my lap, it was like, maybe this is the way we should do it. So I went to Tony and Alan and said, I'm actually editing comics now for Jerry Huntman. Do you want to bring it over here? Is there a way we could do it? And so we worked out a deal, and that's the plan. So it'll be modern, like it'll be the Human Flies if he's stepped out right in front of you in 2024. But we will make everything, the whole 70s thing, and the fact that he was a real stuntman in the 70s and all the rest of it, it'll all make sense.
Oh, beautiful.
It'll all make sense.
That's cool. You got Jim Kruger working on it too. He's his Earth X stuff from Marvel is some of my favorite comics.
Yeah, look, Jim is a power line, and he's a brilliant writer and a fantastic guy. He just he's done a couple of stories for us. He's working on a Cthulhu one for us right now for a book for next year. He wrote a story in Dracula Unfeigned, and he's written a story in an all-star anthology we've got coming up next year called Nosferatu Unbound. So Jim's becoming a prose writer as well, and he's bloody great.
Oh, beautiful.
And he had a story in Caped Fear, Superhuman Horror Stories.
Oh, cool.
Which is another one of our books, and that was a bloody good one as well. So Jim, Jim and Human Fly, true story. I was having lunch with Alan from Human Fly International a few years ago. None of this IPI comics was even a factor, but we were just talking about, I wonder who we can get interested in publishing Human Fly. And I'd had breakfast the day before with Jim. This is because I was in the States. And Alan said, my daughter's working on a project with this guy, Jim Kruger. Apparently he likes the Human Fly as well. I'm going, Alan, I had breakfast with the guy yesterday. So talk about small. So Jim's a Human Fly fan from way back.
Wow.
So as these things started to solidify, it was really natural that when we're working out who would work on the storylines, Alan's name went in the mix and Dana's name went in the mix. And so I mean that's very cool when you actually got someone who is into the concept and wants to contribute to the lore.
Yeah.
That's a very cool thing.
Well,
he's bloody talented, as you know.
That's the beauty of, like, it seems the difference between, like, comic books is, like, there are other industries where it seems like they don't really look for fans of the thing to be writers. They look for just, like, people with writing experience. But, like, Marvel comics seems to be one of the last bastions where, like, the fans are really welcome. And if you have, are encouraged to gravitate and work on the books that they grew up loving. So it's super, super nice in that way. Another beautiful thing about comics.
Yeah, look, I think one of the things about people who play in the fantasy space, and it's in short stories and novels as well, if you have a property or a theme that people who love that literature love, often they'll have a killer idea because they've got their own little, garden that's been growing in the back of their minds about, oh, yeah, that vampire story I'd love to write someday, that Frankenstein story, that zombie story. Whatever it may be, they've got a little grove of ideas. And if you give them a chance, I mean, look, I bet you every writer in comics, whether they've ever done it or not, I bet you they've all got an Avengers story. Whether they've ever been asked, whether they'll ever get to do one, I bet you they've all got one. Because it's been marinating in the back of their brains for maybe decades, that could be amazing because it's actually had so much thought put into it.
Yeah.
So that is an interesting thing about working with public domain or getting permission to do a franchise property. Me and Jerry did a Kolchak book.
Oh, cool.
I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's called Kolchak Meets Nosferatu.
No, it sounds great, though.
If you look that up, you'll find that.
Cool.
That one was just an outpouring from my blackened soul of love for Kolchak. I love Kolchak.
Yeah.
And getting given a chance to write the novella in the middle of that was really good. And, everything just came out.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Nuance and detail and thought I'd had about Kolchak and about his relationship with Vincenzo and all those sorts of things. I got a chance to do them. It was obscene because I don't call that work.
That's the beauty. They say if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life, right? Well, I don't take up any more of your time, Chris. Thank you so much for being on the show. I need to ask. I need to ask before I let you go. Is how to properly pronounce your last name? Is it
Sequeira?
Sequeira. That's what I thought. Okay.
Sequeira. Yeah. It's a Portuguese name.
I noticed that
because my father was Indian, but he was from the part of India, Goa, which used to be owned by the Portuguese. And when the Hindus who lived in Goa converted to Catholicism to become, more fitting into the Portuguese culture, which was running the show. They didn't keep their Hindu names; they changed their names to Portuguese names.
Oh, okay.
Why, if you meet somebody from India and their name is De Silva or Ferreira, De Santos or whatever, they're all from Goa.
Oh wow, I didn't know that. That's super interesting. Yeah. Wow. Well, no, thanks so much, Chris. This is a joy. I'm going to reach out to you at some point too, because I used to do my own little indie comics. It's been a long time, and I wouldn't mind having someone who has some experience in the industry take a look at some of my stuff someday. It's been a while, and I'm just getting back into it because it's been, real life came into play, but now that I have more time, I think I want to go back to it. So. It'd be nice.
Please stay in touch, dude. Yeah,
absolutely. You as well. If you make it out here to Montreal, let me know. I might be around for that convention, so maybe we can hook up in real life.
How far is Nova Scotia the other side or the same side as Montreal?
It's the East Coast, so it's about 12-hour drive from here, 11-hour drive from here to Montreal.
Okay, so it's like it's an hour plane trip.
Yeah, it's about an hour and a half plane. I go there a lot for concerts or something, and just usually spend some time.
Well, look, keep an eye on the IPI Comics website, but keep that date in mind. So it's Montreal, which is the 5th to 7th of July next year.
Yep.
So if we get all our ducks in a row, it'll be issue 1 will go on sale that week. Issue 0 will go on sale that week.
That's huge.
And that will be the place where we'll launch it.
Well, of course, it's the home of the human fly. It's where it's got to be.
And look, I can tell you, we've already been talking about the plot for that issue, and as would only be appropriate, it's got to involve Montreal.
Of course. Oh man, I'm excited. I'll definitely be reading. Anyway, thank you so much, Chris. It was great talking to you, and I really appreciate being on the show.
My pleasure. My pleasure. You take care, mate.
You as well. We'll be in touch.
Cheers, mate. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye. There you have it, my holiday chat with Christopher Sequiera. Great conversation, great talk, learned a lot, and very excited to see some of the work he has coming down the pipeline. It looks like it's going to be great. I hope you are enjoying your day. If you're listening to this on Christmas Day, I hope you're enjoying that. If it's coming a little after, I hope it was a good one. The next episode will be in 2 weeks' time. As I mentioned, Davin Scalhorn, who's my impromptu producer, has been giving me a lot of guests, and I've been doing a lot of recording. So there is a chance I may change the show in the new year to a weekly episode once again, just because it seems like I've been so busy. It may behoove me to do that. And also it'll give you more episodes and have a lot more great conversations as well. So hopefully that's the case. I'm not 100% sure that's going to happen, but it sounds like it's probably going to happen. Next week's guest is somebody that I had talked with at length in a previous episode about his work when I was talking with Kalman about the Alex Robinson. I came to him on his indie comics work with Box Office Poison and Tricked. in our expanding universe. And we had a fantastic conversation. And because of my talk with Kalman, I decided to reach out and to see if I could get him on the show. And thankfully enough, he was receptive, and we had a great talk. So that's already been recorded, the talk, but I will have that episode for you in 2 weeks' time. So you'll enjoy it. It's great, and it's got all the wonderful stuff you like when I talk to people that I really vibe with. And one of them was definitely Alex. So great talk, great conversation, and that'll be yours to listen to in 2 weeks' time. In the meantime, have a happy new year, because I know I'm not going to have an episode drop then, which is coming. I hope 2023 was good to you. I hope 2024 is even better. And as the year ends, I just can't thank you enough for listening to the show, supporting us in any way you can. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, tell your friends, shout from the rooftops. If you have access to someone that could skywrite, I mean, that wouldn't hurt, and please get that out there as well. But in any way, in every way you support the show, I can't thank you enough for making this little COVID project become a many year venture that has no sign of stopping. So I'm loving it, and I hope you are as much as I am. So thank you, and thanks for everything. I think I said thank you enough, but it just means a lot to me, the support that you guys give to the show, and I'm very happy to be able to do it and to bring you these great conversations. So lots more to come in 2024. Looking forward to bringing them to you, and I hope you're looking forward to listening to them. In the meantime, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and Happy New Year, and I will catch you again in 2024. The Graphic Histories Podcast is a proud partner of the United Federation of Podcasts.